This newly published Kester paper is going to change my practice as it answers a question that every sports knee surgeon talks to patients about every single day. I'm sorry there was no Sunday Paper Roundup last week, the first one I've missed since I started recording these 5 or 6 months ago. But I was busy preparing talks, presentations and surgical demos for the ESCA conference in Prague. I'm now back in sunny Blighty, Arthrex Naples sunglasses. If you know, you know. And I'm not in Dubai, even though it looks like it. And it's a Sunday Paper Roundup where I read the paper so you don't have to. And it's a perfectly timed one post-ESCA, as this week a really important open access paper dropped from the Kester Journal. Side note, I met the editor, Michael Hirschman. He is incredibly tall, and his team in Prague, we had photos taken. Guys, please do share them. This paper answers a question every sports knee surgeon talks to patients about every single week. When can an athlete return to sport after meniscus surgery, and what are the risks? This is the largest synthesis we currently have on this question, and it matters. So let me walk you through it. The paper's out of Lugano, Antwerp, and the Mayo Clinic with my guys, Aaron Critch and Peter Verdonk, as two of the authors, so you know it's solid. It's a robust systematic review and meta-analysis. 23 studies, over 1,100 athletes, all split into 3 groups: meniscectomy, meniscus repair, and meniscal allograft transplantation. Importantly, those having ACL reconstruction at the same time were excluded. So this is isolated meniscus surgery in athletes, which makes it a cleaner question with narrower applicability. And level 1 evidence. Now the headline numbers. Return to sport times after meniscectomy, 2 months. Meniscus repair, about 6 months. And meniscus transplant, 9 months. And return to sport rates for each of those groups were 98%, 97%, and 94%. Surprisingly high numbers given all the scaremongering about meniscus surgery from people who don't do it. Seriously though, many non-surgeons talk about knee arthroscopy and meniscus surgery like it's a death sentence. And this proves that it's highly effective and safe surgery for those who need it, and not everyone does. Return to pre-injury sporting level was highest for meniscectomy at 84%, 81% for meniscus repair, and 77% for meniscus transplant. Again, no significant differences between the groups, but clearly for a small proportion of people it comes at a cost. Just remember, the people we're talking about here would have been really struggling, not being able to play or compete at all without surgery. Some of them would have been struggling with activities of daily life. So at first glance, anyway, it looks like meniscectomy wins on speed and everything else is broadly equivalent, but the buried lead is in the subgroup analysis, and this is the number that should genuinely influence counselling. In the medial meniscus subgroup, meniscal repair retained 99.1% of athletes to pre-injury level, with a confidence interval of 96 to 100%. So when the medial meniscus can be repaired in an athlete, repair it. Return to sport is slightly longer, about 5 or 6 months, but it pays dividends when it comes to long-term joint health. But it's a real conversation to have with an athlete needing surgery in season. However, the paper couldn't pool failure and reoperation rates for meniscectomy or repair because of heterogeneity between studies, and that's a genuine limitation. But for meniscus allograft transplantation, the authors do provide numbers: 13% graft-related reoperation and around 1% requiring knee replacement. And that's really quite remarkable for a procedure historically framed as salvage surgery in high-demand patients with very limited career-ending options only, often sport-ending. Then those figures are actually remarkably reassuring. The authors argue that this should challenge the traditional view of meniscus transplant as exclusively a last resort surgery, and I think that's really fair. Sorry, this sounds a bit much. Now the critical analysis, and this is where the paper earns its place. First, this is a strong, generous, well-executed synthesis, open access, international collaboration, exactly the kind of cross-Atlantic academic work that's made Kester and ESCA such important contributors to sports knee surgery. The authors are appropriately calibrated throughout. They do not oversell the findings. Their conclusion explicitly states that treatment choice should be guided by an individualized, multidisciplinary approach aimed at optimizing both athletic recovery and joint preservation, and that final phrase matters. Now, where the paper is particularly honest about its limits, the cohorts are not matched. Meniscectomy patients are older, repair patients are younger, as you'd expect. Meniscus transplant patients are post-meniscectomy by definition. So when the headline says return to sport rates are equivalent, what you're really seeing is that good surgical selection works, not that the procedures are interchangeable, and follow-up is predominantly short to medium term. The paper explicitly cannot tell us what these patients' knees look like at 10 or 15 years, and that's important because return to sport is not the same thing as long-term success. Meniscectomy will predictably get athletes back faster because less biological healing is required, so less protection, quicker healing, quicker recovery. But once meniscal tissue is removed, the biological profile of that knee changes, contact pressures rise, and every surgeon watching this understands the long-term degenerative implications of that. This paper is not designed to capture that outcome, and the authors openly acknowledge that limitation. So what this paper actually shows, and shows very clearly, is that all 3 procedures work well for their intended indication in the short to medium term. Meniscus preservation is not a career ender, and the long-term case for repair, when feasible, is becoming increasingly difficult to argue against. So what's my verdict? Should we ignore it? Should you be aware of it? Should you consider it? Or should you go right ahead and change your practice? Well, I say go ahead and change your practice because I will. 3 things I'm taking from this into my clinic next week. 1. Meniscus transplantation is not the end of the sporting knee we may have considered it to be. 94% get back to sport, 77% at their pre-injury level, 13% reoperation rate, 1% knee replacement rate. And all that in a high-demand cohort. So that's not salvage surgery territory anymore. And for me, that's the biggest takeaway for this paper. 2. When the medial meniscus can be repaired in an athlete, repair it. 99% return to pre-injury level with about a 3-month preservation tax. That's as good as meniscus surgery gets. 3. On the lateral side, repair takes about 4 months longer than meniscectomy. That is a real cost, but lateral meniscectomy in athletes is potentially career shortening and career ending. So unless the tear is truly irreparable, repair the lateral meniscus and protect the joint. Because the real challenge in meniscus surgery is not getting athletes back quickly, it's helping them keep a functional knee long after sport is over, even though most of them will be thinking that long term. That's the conversation you must have with every athlete sitting in front of you. Anyway, see you next Sunday. I'll keep breaking down the evidence as it lands. Cheers.